This is a series of career development talks for artists and creatives hosted by the Alteronce Art Museum. My name is Devin Briggs. I'm the Adult and Community Programs Manager here at the museum. And I'm thrilled to be joined by two incredible guests who will be guiding us through a really valuable, interesting conversation about financial literacy for artists as that kind of bedrock for managing an artist's career. So to introduce our guests, Alteronce Gumby grew up in Harrisburg, PA, so kind of local, currently resides in New York City. He graduated from the Yale School of Art with an MFA in painting and printmaking in 2016, and has since participated in numerous international artist residencies and has exhibited extensively throughout North America, Europe, and Asia. Recent solo shows include Bodhi Projects in Berlin, Koki Arts in Japan, Zona Mako in Mexico City, and he's currently represented by Nicola Vassal Gallery in NYC. And this is an old bio. You are so busy. I'm sure there's so much new stuff that you've done already in a couple months. So Alteronce's show Dark Matter is on view at the Allentown Art Museum until April 9th. So if you haven't seen it yet, please come by. As you may have heard already, the museum is free. So please come take a visit before that comes down. And excuse me, our second guest and financial literacy expert is DJ Kormanik. DJ is a business consultant for the Lehigh University Small Business Development Center, where he works with startup entrepreneurs and small business owners, educating and advising them in startup growth, management, and sustainability. DJ has extensive experience in entrepreneurship counseling and training with community-based organizations, as well as banking and project management experience in the private sector. DJ is also a musician, and in his free time, you'll often find him pursuing his lifelong passion of music and music production. So with the introductions aside, I will turn this over to DJ and Alteronce to begin this conversation. Around 7 p.m., we'll start a Q&A. So get your questions ready. Feel free to throw them into the Q&A, and hopefully we'll really have an interesting conversation. So turning it over to you two.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. Thank you, DJ, for having this conversation with me. Thank you, Allentown Art Museum, for bringing this whole thing together. I've always wanted to have this conversation. I think as a working artist, I, kind of always approached being an artist, with questions. I had questions in my studio about how to make my work. I've always had questions outside of my studio about how to make it as an artist, how to make my living as an artist. And, as an artist grows within their career and, moves through various phases of their career, more questions arise. And so one of the questions I always had was, always kind of circling around finances. I feel like art school, they taught me how to look at art, how to think about making art, how to, dive into that creative process. But then when I started engaging with galleries and collectors, a different dialogue started to happen. And there was a kind of, grouped around finances, what was the price of my work, how do is it under consignment agreement, how am I writing receipts if I'm selling work out of my studio? And I started kind of searching out for this information on my own because it seemed like these were questions that weren't necessarily being answered within art school. And so there was an education of financial literacy that I felt like I was missing, that I felt like my colleagues were missing. As artists, often sometimes you get to a point where you come into a lot of money really fast, or and then it's like, what do I do with that? How do I money manage? Not a lot of us, we're taught that within our households, how to manage funds, or pay our taxes, or even how to keep our books and, kind of schedule things as a small business owner. So I'm excited to have this conversation today with DJ to kind of like shed some light um, on this section of the industry, as a creative person, as someone who came out of art school, where the conversation, it wasn't in the curriculum. So DJ, I think I'd like to kind of start this conversation, just kind of taking it from the beginning, if we can all put on our caps of imagination and just imagine that, I'm an art student coming out of art school. Maybe you're a musician coming out of, music school. What should we be thinking about ourselves as artists, as creative beings, or should we also be thinking about ourselves as small business owners?
Well, personally, I always believe that if you feel like you're a creative person and an artist, that you need to be that at the very beginning, the first and foremost. You're either creative or you're not. To me, it's a matter of determining, can you make money with your art? I mean, if we're creative, we should be creating all the time. The determination in my mind is there a market for what we do? And from a business perspective, can we reach that market with our message and let them know that we exist? So when it comes to being the creative side, absolutely, I think we need to do that. But the other side is to be realistic in my mind with what we can truly make with the business that we're doing. And then do we have the drive to do it? I mean, I came out of college not as a music major, but certainly played back then. But I got married right away. And the thought process of my dream of being in a band and being a rock star kind of went away, because I realized in my world that it wasn't going to work. I wanted to be married and have children, and it wasn't going to fit. But music never went away for me. It's always been a hobby. And that's kind of the first determinant in my mind when people are coming out, is even if they went and got their master's in fine art, is this going to be a hobby or is this going to be a business? And the big difference between the two is, in a hobby, you're actually putting money into it. It's costing you money to do it. If it's a business, it's paying your bills. And it's not just art, Alteronce, it's a lot of small businesses start up and they think they're making money, but when you get right down to it and look at the finances, they're not really. And it's okay to have a hobby, and it's okay to put hours and hours into it. And it doesn't discount the quality, in my perspective, the quality of the art at all. It just doesn't.
Not at all, no.
I believe the successful artists, the ones that are making money like yourself, or help us try to aspire to be there, but you're standing on our shoulders as well, the entire art community. The cream does rise to the top, but we want to be realistic with ourselves and make sure that we have a business, not a hobby, and then decide to move in that direction. Now, once you make that determination, you need to start thinking of yourself as a business person and doing the business people thing that kind of grates on artists and creatives sometimes. Following up, the calling on time, to doing what you're saying you're going to do, to all those little business things, because you're not working with artists anymore in that community. You're working with business people, and they're used to a certain kind of thing. You don't want to give up your personal feeling, but you have to start thinking like a business person, thinking like about expenses, thinking about revenue streams, how to take your current skill sets and leverage them to make more money, especially in the beginning, Alteronce. I mean, now you're successful and have a name, and you're growing your brand. But in the beginning, before you got that, and I don't know your specific thing, but many artists are struggling in the beginning. Well, do they want to work at like a 7-Eleven to make extra money, or do they want to try to use their skill in another way that's creative, where they're still in the community somehow? So, but you have to think consciously of that. I think the idea of just, I'm going to paint in my attic and make it rich, or I'm going to make music in my basement and make it rich, that doesn't happen anymore. I mean, we have to go out and market ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I think that's great. Thank you for that. There's definitely a moment where, I think everything starts out as a hobby, right? As a passion. You're interested in something, whether it's art, whether it's music, whether it's, baking, something. It all starts out as an interest. It grows into a passion. And then, so oftentimes, that passion, makes you almost like an expert or someone who's kind of sought after, that does this thing that you do very well. And, people are willing to pay you to do that. And so, it kind of happens very organically. Sometimes people don't see themselves growing into this position, but I think it's always great to have a sense of awareness of what's happening and what direction you're maybe wanting to move into. And yeah, I think when I first started out, I think the first piece painting I sewed was at a group show. It was at a holiday show. I was taking classes at the Art Students League in New York City on 57th Street. And I had a painting in the group show, the holiday show. First time showing anything, it was just a skyscape that I painted. It was like a stormy day skyscape. And I got a frame I went to Pearl Frame back when Pearl was still down on Canal. And, I put a $20, put it in a $20 frame. And, I just hung it just because I just wanted to be a part of it. Everybody was doing it. Unbeknownst to me, it sold on the first day. And I got a call and they were like, hey, this is, Kate down at our Students League. Your piece just sold, and we wanted to know, we have 3 days left of this holiday exhibition. We wanted to know if you want to put in another piece for the exhibition. In which case, I did. I was like, sure. I was talking to my friends. I was like, my piece sold. Should I put in another piece? And they're like, yeah. Maybe you can sell another one. So I went back to Pearl, got another frame, put that one in. That one did sell. But I was at that moment that I kind of realized that, hey, I could maybe make some coin off my art. I before that I was just, taking these drawing classes, and I was working at a nightclub, and I never thought I could actually make a living from my art. I just knew I was passionate about art, or I had an interest. And it was from there I really started, talking to other people who were kind of in the field. I was also a artist assistant for someone who ran a ceramic dinnerware line. And so, she was a small business owner, and I was kind of like the packaging and shipping department of her company. So I was kind of watching her, and, I was seeing the orders going out, I was getting my check, and, so I was kind of surveying her, watching to see how she kind of ran her business. And that kind of gave me a little bit of a gist of what it meant, or what it would take to run a small business, to kind of make a living from my art. But not everyone has that perspective. So I guess, say I am, young Alteronce, or a young artist. At what point should I guess, maybe I'm not making enough to pay my bills completely, but I'm making enough money to maybe be comfortable, a couple, maybe $100, maybe $1,000 a month. At what point should I mainly probably start thinking about it? Is it at the point where all my bills are being paid from my passion, that now I'm maybe considering myself as a small business owner? And then within that process, what should I be thinking? Should I be starting to separate my finances at that point?
Absolutely. Well, let's take a step back and use you as an example, if I may. So
Sure.
You take that painting and go get it framed, and you put it in the gallery. Up to that point, you're technically not in business. Okay. You haven't registered for a business, you haven't picked a name, you haven't done anything. As soon as that painting sells and you get paid, you're officially a sole proprietor. Now, you're in New York, So the laws might be slightly different in New York than Pennsylvania because, that shouldn't be major difference, and that's a federal thing there, but sole proprietor, as soon as you accept money for a product or service, I'm a sole proprietor, whether I'm cutting my neighbor's grass or not, I'm in business cutting grass for that purposes. And the government makes it very easy to do that. You don't have to advertise anything. You don't have to change your name. You are just being paid as you for your product. I think as soon as you sell something or feel like you believe that you need to start thinking of yourself as a business. Now you don't need to form an LLC necessarily right away. And I don't know if I should, the difference between an LLC and a sole proprietor is the sole proprietor is you. The government looks at you and your business as the same thing. So if this was a part-time thing for you and you're making money painting, but you're also making money doing something else, the government would just have you lump all that income together and you would be taxed as an individual. It's the cheapest way to do things, but it doesn't give you any liability protection if you were sued, because the government views you and the business as the same thing. What an LLC is, it's very simple. It creates a separate entity altogether. There's Alteronce the individual and Alteronce the artist LLC, and that the business has an EIN number, their own rights and everything. But if that organization gets sued, they can't reach beyond the organization into your personal world. Now it's hard to imagine in the world of art somebody doing something that somebody would be so crazy that they would sue you for. But in the rest of the entrepreneur world, if you're opening a restaurant, anytime you're serving food to somebody, there's the possibility for something to happen. And you don't even have to be in the wrong. They just have to be litigious and want to do something. So that LLC allows you to have a separate entity. But you don't have to do that until at the very end. I mean, and the only reason to form an LLC early is if you love the name. Because in Pennsylvania, and I'm sure it's the same way in New York, only one person can use the name. So once the name is I'm Window Shop Music, so nobody else can use that. I didn't necessarily love that name. We just didn't have anything better. But if you had something that, if you had something that would that all your life you've wanted to name your company, well, if it's available, you might want to reserve it, because in Pennsylvania it's only $125. And you don't have to be making money. You don't have to deal with taxes until you deal with revenue. But back to the original, as soon as you think you're making money or make money, you're technically in business. You might as well start thinking like a business person, in my mind. I think it's better to start that a little earlier if you truly believe you have the talent to do it. And I believe all of us have the artistic talent to do it. I don't know about the business jobs.
Yeah, I believe so too. I believe we all can make it. And I think, if a lot of people, I'm not sure, I'm a creative person. Math was never my subject in school. So I was always a little intimidated when it came to tax season or managing my finances. And so, once I got to the point where, okay, let's say imaginary hats are back on. Let's say I get to the point where, I'm working my part-time job or full-time job, and I'm doing my art thing. At a certain point, the art thing kind of takes off, and I start making twice as much money from my art career as I do from my part-time or full-time job. And I decided to leave that job to, invest fully into what I'm doing, because it's making me more money, it's paying my bills. And let's say I do register for an LLC, right, as you outlined, and I do get an EIN number. What can I do with that EIN number to help, kind of set me up for the long run in terms of managing my finances?
Well, what that allows you to do, the first step that allows you to do is to open a bank account. And that's the primary thing. An EIN number is strictly like a social security number, but for a business. But in Pennsylvania, you would take the proof that you got the LLC, which is a document from the state. You would take the EIN number proof from the IRS. And when you would go to your bank, you could use that to open a business bank account. But from then on, as people pay you, they need to, if it's a different name than your personal name, they need to pay you in that name, because in the United States, from a banking perspective, you need to deposit checks into a like titled account. Like I couldn't deposit a check to DJ Kormanik into your account unless I countersigned it. There has to be a matching thing on that. So that's the first step that allows you to do, is to get that situated. And you mentioned, and I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, and when you talk about hiring a tax preparer, I think when you're doing that, when you're to the point where I think I can do this, I'm going to have my business. If you're an LLC, you need to realize there are a couple of rules that you need to maintain. And the biggest one, the biggest one, is you can't commingle your funds. Once you become Alteronce LLC, all that money, when you buy paint, when you buy rent space, when you buy a ticket to Tokyo, whatever you're doing, business-wise, has to come out of that bank account. Okay. Now you might be a single member LLC, meaning you're just one owner, and the vast majority of that's how people start. So the money in your personal account and your business account is all yours. So but if let's say you were going to Tokyo and you only had 5,000 in your business checking, but you had a lot of money in your personal, you can move the money across and make that bank and buy it, but you have to have that transaction. Conversely, if you had a lot of money in your business account and you decided, hey, I'm going to go on a personal vacation this time, you can't buy it out of your business. You got to transfer it over. And that maintains that liability aspect of it. But that doesn't really help you manage things in the future. That just allows you to get your bank account together. But I would absolutely be suggesting hiring a CPA in the beginning. You mentioned about a tax preparer. There's a difference between a tax preparer, and I'm not belittling them because I'm sure they're incredibly knowledgeable, but all they're doing is taxes. Okay. I would prefer my clients to work with a CPA because I want them to understand their business. They certainly can do the taxes for them, which is critical, but I want them to understand the business. And at this point, I start talking to my clients about, first off, building relationships. I mean, business, even for creative, regardless of what our product is, when you get into the world of business, it's about building relationships. If you're a plumber, if you're an artist, if you're a restaurateur, if whatever it is, a truck driver, if you want to be successful, you have to be great at building relationships with your customers, with the people that you're purchasing product from. It's all about, it's hard to imagine it not being about that. Everything is about building relationships. But what I talk to my clients about is building a de facto advisory board. Okay. When you're working with your banker, this should be somebody that you trust. Okay. And are willing to talk legit about your business. If you have a CPA, a good accountant, this is somebody somewhere down the road, because at some point, as you continue to grow, you might have a question. Do I want to open an office in Los Angeles? Well, you want people who aren't family or friends, but know you well enough to talk to it. And I call them the de facto advisory board, because we don't need an advisory board as an LLC. But I would like my banker, if it were me, I'd like my banker on it. I would like my business consultant if I had one. I would like my insurance agent, because business insurance is something different. A financial planner, if there's somebody involved, CPA. These are people that I trust, that I can go back and go, hey, I'm thinking about doing something crazy. What do you guys think? And and in the beginning, when we don't have any money for board members, these people are invaluable. But I stress that they really shouldn't be friends and family. This should be somebody outside of your sphere a little bit. Does that make sense?
No, for sure. I mean, I'm always someone who relies on people's expertise, their talents, and their knowledge to help me build my business. Which is why I'm reaching out. I have this conversation with someone like you, who's very knowledgeable in these types of things, because I feel like as an artist, we just want to focus on the art. We just want to focus on creating. And I think we're best when we're just in our studios, or in our creative spaces doing what we do, but also take some time out to conversate and seek advice with our advisors, to make sure that our finances are in good standing.
Right.
And I think that's where a lot of people get caught up, because sometimes you have immediate, you kind of have this success. It's very immediate. You especially with artists, you see it with musicians all the time. They rise to fame very fast. They get a tons of money, and then they go on these spending sprees, and then they're broke. It's like the MC Hammer thing. So I think giving some aspect of knowledge, of some information on yes, having certain advisors, a part of your circle, part of your community, to run these things by, these financial decisions, major financial decisions by, so that your business doesn't tank, and that you have some longevity for some momentum for the long run. You mentioned insurance, and I wonder, as a, going back to my imaginary, self, as a, emerging artist, I'm having some success. Let's say, I'm starting to, it's now 2-3 years that I've been living off my work. I have, my business bank account. I have my CPA. Should I be thinking about business insurance? Should I be thinking about life insurance? What ways should I be? Is there anything that I should be thinking about to maybe protect my business outside of just having it registered as an LLC?
Absolutely. And to be honest, I think you should be thinking about business insurance long before this. When you're starting to make revenue, you want to make sure business insurance is different than residential, like home insurance. Things that are covered in your home, that if you have an artist studio, and I'm not an insurance agent, but this is my best understanding. If you have an artist studio in your home, theoretically, your homeowner's insurance could cover that because it's part of your home. But if you gather that equipment up and you're driving to a show and you wreck your car, now you're doing business in your residential car. Insurance don't like to pay if they don't have to. So if they can find a reason. And what I would recommend is talking to a business insurance agent that you respected. And if they're good at what they do, they'll interview you to find out what you need, and not sell you stuff that you don't, and you might not need any at all. But you want to make sure that you're covered, because again, I have a lot of equipment in my basement, and my homeowner's insurance might cover it. But if I packed up and went to a gig and had it stolen, would it cover it then? If I'm not in business, I don't have an LLC, then yes, potentially, because I'm not considering myself a business. But once I say I'm in business, you want to make sure that you're covered on that side.
Yeah.
And the other one was
life insurance. As
life insurance
should I be thinking about life insurance?
To me, life insurance is a different animal altogether. To me, and again, it's personal opinion on this. Life insurance in my mind is to replace your income when you go. Okay. I'm an empty nester now, so I'm free to go, I guess, anytime now. But like 20 years from now, when we still had college ahead of us and stuff, if I were to drop dead, we needed my income for the next 20 years. Okay. Right. That's what life insurance is for me. If you don't have anybody right this second to like leave stuff behind for, or that you're building for, you don't necessarily need life insurance. But as you have other responsibilities to other folks, and you're saying, okay, what happens if I die? And that's an individual question. If one person dies, they might not have anybody, and it's just like, that's fine. I didn't have to have an income. Well, like I'm saying, in my world, if I was gone, we still needed money to survive. So life insurance in my mind really is a personal issue, not a business issue. Now, if there's two business partners If you're another artist with another artist partner, then that's a different story altogether, because
Yeah.
if we lose you, then we lose all that revenue stream. There's key partner insurance, there's that kind of stuff. That is business insurance. So
Okay.
so when that kind of thing happens, you want to make sure, because even if you don't have folks, family that says that you're building for, you still might not want your brand to go away should you go. You might want, money to
Yeah.
funnel into, so the people who are in your studio helping you can continue the business. So
Right.
that's kind of a personal thing on that side.
Okay. I was also thinking about, and then maybe in the lines of like disability insurance. As a small business owner, say you get injured, you can't necessarily work anymore. You can't work your business. It's just you. Is disability insurance something that people should be thinking about?
Definitely, I think consider, but a lot of it becomes expense in the beginning.
Right.
You truly have to balance it. If you're not making money, then what are you insuring? You know what I mean? If you're spending
Right.
$1,000 a month to insure yourself, but you're not making any money yet, in my mind, that doesn't make fiscal sense. Let's get to the point where you are making money and say, all right, now if I got hurt and couldn't do this, but you need,
Yeah.
but single person homeowners, health insurance, because you talked about that. National average right now is $456 a month. Okay.
Mhm.
So if you were a sole proprietor and didn't have health insurance and you wanted health insurance or an LLC, that's what you would be paying about. If there's
Right.
disability insurance, we want to add that on top and say, all right, what's that total number, and see if it
Right.
fits into our budget, as opposed to the risk of disability.
Yeah. That's great. And let's talk about budgeting for a little bit. As an artist, small business owner, I guess it's really up to the business, or it's up to the business, how much, say you have revenue coming in. Is there kind of a rule of thumb of how much money, a percentage of money from the revenue should be set aside for savings? How much should be set aside for maybe supplies? How much should be set aside for living expenses? And, I guess even like an emergency fund, or even how much should be set aside for taxes? Because sometimes it's not necessarily always taken out. Some people have regular 9-to-5 jobs. You see that pay stub, you're seeing the breakdown of how much money is coming out of your account each paycheck. But when you're running your own business, people are just giving you a check, and it's up to you to break down and start putting money aside for these various things. Do you have any advice towards that?
Absolutely, especially like in your world, you sell a painting. We'll use it as an example. You sell a painting for $50,000. Okay, you now have the check in your hand. You don't really have 50,000 because you owe the government, and I'm making the number up, 15,000 already. So you have 35. Okay, so for sure, immediately in my mind, we want that to happen every time that revenue comes in, especially for creatives, where we don't have like an accounting background, or we don't have accounting people in our building. Every time, if you were a realtor, if you sold a home, you do the same thing. Take that chunk out right away. In my mind, don't save it till the end of the year and hope you don't spend it.
What percentage is that? Is that 30 or 40?
Well, that would kind of be within the tax bracket that you are. So
okay,
if you were in the 15% tax bracket, it would kind of depend on where in the year it happened as well. If you've already made $1 million and that 50,000 is at the end of December before you go into the next year, you might have you might be in a higher tax bracket because it ratchets up with the more money you make. But you can go again with the CPA, or you can go and say, this is what I believe I'm going to make this year. I need to hold back 26% or whatever it truly is. I think that's something to deal with right away. You mentioned about them a little bit of how much to save and those kind of things. Again, that depends on the individual a little bit, but there are definite things that I think you should take care of. One is an emergency fund if you can. Now, emergency funds are primarily, we think of them more for employees who all of a sudden get fired, and now it's going to take 6 months for them to find a job. there might be unemployment, there might not be, depending on the situation. Can you survive that? Can you survive 6 months? And that kind of depends on the person as well. And, maybe people want a week's extra cash, but 6 months is a pretty decent number that people tell you all the time. So that's the emergency fund. And once you get that taken care of, you can start to invest in other things, in my mind. And I talk about, when it comes to saving money, saving it into buckets. The first bucket is the short-term bucket. This is the one where I'm going to buy a car in 18 months, and I'm saving money for that. I don't want to risk losing any of that. So I'm going to put that in a very safe, like a passbook bank account or a statement savings account, because I don't want, or maybe I'm buying a TV in 18 months. I don't want to be ready to buy that TV and all of a sudden look at my bank account and all of a sudden I have half of what I had because I put it in the wrong investment, so to speak. So that's the short-term bucket, and you're saving that, and you want it to be very, very safe. The next one is and that's like about 1 to 2 years. The next one is like an intermediate, 3 to 7 years. Maybe you're saving to buy a piece of equipment for the business or buy a home. This is stuff that you want to invest longer term. It can potentially be a little bit more risky, but when you're investing in the market or any of that stuff, and we'll talk about that, you could potentially lose money as well. So short term, you don't want to risk it at all. Intermediate term, you can potentially deal with a little bit of loss because you have a little bit of time to make up for it, but it still needs to be a relatively safe investment vehicle, if that makes sense. The retirement and long term, that's where you set it and forget it. And in my mind, you pick a number that makes sense to you, and I have a couple of examples, and you just kind of let it go on cruise control and do it. Now, as you make more money, you want to add more money into the retirement, but I'm sadly turning 65 this year. I never dreamed it would happen, so I am. And I'm thrilled that it did, don't get me wrong, but
yeah, congratulations, you made it.
But you don't think you're going to get there. So when somebody says to the 20-year-old, you got to think about retirement, I was 20 at one point, and I said, oh yeah, that's crap. So but I'm here now, and it's the truth. In the example that I have here, because you mentioned about like a percentage, that kind of depends, but the one that I have is the average. Does the S&P 500, do you understand investing, what the S&P 500 is?
Yes.
Okay, well, just for the crowd, all it is a collection of the 500 biggest companies that are in the US stock market, and you invest into what's an index fund. So every dollar that you put into that fund kind of gets separated out of all 500. It allows you to offset your risk because you're investing in all 500 at once. It's possible that one business could literally go bankrupt. That happened to a company named Enron about 20 years ago. But there's 499 others that can kind of bring you up. If you look at the historic average since the beginning of the stock market on a 10-year basis, it's almost 10%. So if you can keep it in for 10 years and not think about it, not worry about it, it's going to go up one time and down another, but you'll average a 10% investment over the course of time. Okay. Using that as an example, if I invest $100 a month and don't start with any money just $100 a month at age 20, I was at one point, and do that for 45 years until I'm 65. Okay. At the percentage, 9.5%. At the end of that 45 years, I'll have $900,000 in the bank. And I'll have only invested out of my pocket $54,000. Okay. Wow. So, but that's me starting at age 20. If I wait 10 years and start at age 30, that same $100, same situation is only worth $339,000. So when they talk about retirement and when to start building retirement, to me, it's akin to the adage of planting a tree. When's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. The second best time to plant it is today. And that's kind of thing. As soon as you get to the point where you have a little bit of money or you're making money, and I have 2 younger sons and I'm leaning on them as well, I want them to just get used to it. In the world of percentages, if you were working in a corporate world, I would normally say about 6%. and do that
6%.
for the rest of your life. When you make money, if you get a raise, your retirement gets a raise. But you kind of set it and forget it. That should be something that just happens to go on automatically. So again, back to the thing, as you're making money, you want to think about your emergency fund, your other buckets, to make sure that you're not, now you might not have any short-term thing because maybe you don't have a short-term goal right now. Okay, you might have your house already taken care of, but retirement, I think, has to happen, because I could have pursued a career in music or anything I chose, and it could have been a total failure. But if I'd have been saving for retirement, I would still be able to be here now and live. And you're either going to get here or you're not. I'd rather have a little bit of money in my pocket here and take advantage of the youth, especially the young folks, and start early. And as you can see, $100 a month isn't much necessarily.
No,
but if
it goes a long way.
Yeah. And that's if you don't add any more to it at all. Like, say when you're 30, if you're starting to make more money and did $200 a month, and I didn't go through that calculation, but all of a sudden you're talking about several $1 million. And that's the power of compounding interest. Albert Einstein said the compounding interest is the 8th wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it, and he who doesn't pays it. And it's the truth. You know, it's not rocket science. It's there for everybody. You just have to do it.
You have to do it. You have to have consistency and discipline to create that type of, pullback, or that type of return. So that's really great. So we were talking. I'm glad you brought up these retirement, and I know you used the S&P, the stock market as an example. Are there any other examples of maybe retirement accounts or strategies that artists or small business owners could use? The S&P is, I believe, considered a high risk profile. Are there any low or moderate risk engines you could suggest?
Well, let's step back and talk about the retirement accounts themselves. Okay.
Okay. Yes. Sure.
Okay. And then, because what you invest in can change depending on the individual. There are two primary individual retirement accounts. They're called IRAs, individual retirement accounts. And you'll hear people talk about the traditional one and the Roth IRA. Okay. The traditional one is, again, typically more involved in the business world, where they put the money in the IRA for you before they pay taxes. So if I make $50,000 a year and I put $10,000 a year in my IRA, for tax purposes, the government only looks at $40,000. Does that make sense? So
definitely, yeah.
It reduces my tax liability now. Now that $10,000 grows and grows and grows. And at some point down the road, when I'm, give or take, my age, I need to start taking that money out of that account. Then I start paying taxes on it. So I'm deferring my taxes until later in life. And the reason for that is, typically when you get to be my age, you make less, or as you get older and older and older, you don't make an income, and theoretically the tax bracket would be lower then. So that's the traditional IRA. The other one is a Roth IRA. And what this is that same scenario. I make 50,000 and I put 10,000 in the IRA. I'm taxed on the entire income. I'm paying the tax on it before I invest it. But now that 10,000 can sit in there the whole time, and it's tax-free when I start to use it. So I absolutely sincerely, and I'm not a certified financial planner, but I absolutely sincerely, especially folks under 30 or so, the Roth IRA is the way to go, especially if you're not making, typically the traditional is when you're making a ton of money and you want to reduce your tax base. But in the beginning, we're probably not making a ton. We just want to get money into our IRA. And then it's consistency. You set that up, you go to a financial planner if you're not working for a company, and you can set that up on your own. But you want to set it up so in my mind, that it automatically comes out, that pick a number that you can handle right now and keep it going and keep it going. And if you get to the next year and things are going well, maybe boot it up even a little bit higher, because again, that's your nest egg. And the problem with our IRAs a little bit is, once you put the money in, is a penalty to get the money back out. you can get it out, but I think it's a 10% penalty before you turn 59. So there's
For matures, yeah.
so there's incentive. They're incenting you to just keep it in, but it's still accessible in emergency, and you can borrow money against them. And I just found out recently you can even buy a franchise using some 401k money. So it's accessible.
Oh, wow.
But in my mind, it's locked away. I need to move it to a different place where I don't think about it. So those are the two biggest. As soon as somebody's making money, whether they're making it from selling creative stuff or doing their part-time gig, they need to be taking care of that, because as I tell my sons, once they pay for the retirement, and then they can spend every other penny, because if they can go on vacations every year, do whatever they want, because they're taking care of the thing that's important in the end.
Yeah, no, that's really great. And thank you for bringing up the difference between the two investment accounts or retirement accounts, excuse me.
Right.
Is there any other ways you can or any other advice you can give for, I guess, a small business owner, and ways in which they can save money on their taxes?
Well, to me, that goes back again, using a CPA and somebody who's sharp with that. You for sure want to. Where was the question on that? Because I thought I had written something down. Creative ways. There's not a ton of creative ways, but for sure you want to hire a good CPA, because the laws change all the time. Now, if you're a small person selling $100 here, $100 there, it's not going to matter. But certainly as you get bigger and start to make more money, you want somebody, in my opinion, who studies the accounting laws all the time, because they change.
Right.
And there are loopholes in there, and you want those loopholes to now work for you or the artist. And they work for everybody, but we don't know that they're there. So the CPA can help. I believe you want to save all your receipts, and especially in the beginning leading up, because I'm buying paint, I'm buying equipment. I haven't sold anything yet, but I'm building all this towards my business. And all of a sudden I sell something and I'm in business. It's like, well, I have all these expenses related to that. If I didn't keep those receipts, I can't offset any of that. And so as you're leading up to it, the other one is you want to be vigilant, because and actually pay your taxes. And it's surprising how many people, even people who think they're great business people, they get so caught up in what's going on, you lose track of time. And that's an incredibly painful thing. It's better to work through it, even if you don't have the money to pay it, to at least start the process, because the penalties can happen. And be honest with what you do. Track real money coming in. But the real thing is, understanding write-offs, making sure that you're tracking all those things. And talking to your accountant as an advisor and saying, hey, I'm going to Tokyo next month. Is there something that can I write off that ticket? Well, potentially, because it's paying for part of the business, but they know much more about it than we do. So
for sure.
Now, the real money saver is if you can understand, if you put all your receipts into a big giant bag and give them a garbage bag, that's going to be very expensive, because they have to sort through it. Now, if you're organized and you say, these are my trip receipts, these are my expense, and give them that, it's a lot less expensive. So you can save money because they can hire, you don't have to pay the accountant to do that. They can hire their staff to spread those numbers. But if it's in a bag, you're going cutting and pasting, that's going to be an expensive proposition.
And one of the ways, I guess you mentioned it very early on, to kind of organize your business expenses from your personal expenses, is by opening a business bank account. And I was wondering if you had any other tips towards financial systems that someone could use to maybe manage their business. Maybe there's an app or some software that is very popular that you could suggest people use to help organize themselves.
Absolutely. There are a couple. The industry standard right now is QuickBooks for small businesses, and you can do that online. Does somebody need that in the very, very beginning? Maybe not. It's good to understand and learn, because at some point, as the true business person, we want them to understand the nuts and bolts of your business. You're an artist right now, but 10 years from now, you'll still be an artist, but you should have a better handle on shipping and costs and all that stuff because it's your
Right.
baby. You know, it
Yeah.
becomes entirely you. So I forget where I was at.
No. Yeah, you mentioned QuickBooks as
Oh yeah,
as,
okay.
as
So
a
QuickBooks
as a
is interesting.
benchmark for
The other side of it
yeah.
is a company called Wave. Wave is totally
Okay.
free. Okay, but something to keep track of, even if you're just writing it down on paper. But QuickBooks and those things, and they're nice because once you get an accountant, you can sync your books with them, and as you put your stuff in, all they're doing is running reports, and that makes it even less expensive for you to use as an accountant. But that's the financial thing. The other piece of software, and I know you didn't ask this question, but I want to throw it in there. I truly believe that for aspiring artists who want to start to make money, they need to have a good way to keep track of their customer relations. There's the CRM stuff. I want to be able to remember this conversation. You know, if I'm talking to you as a client for whatever reason, I want to be able to go back and put my notes in. And then next time we call, I'll be able to reference what I did. I might even be able to reference, hey, I know I need to call Alteronce 3 months from now, and I can put that in. That's the relationship side of building that is kind of just nuts and bolts. If you don't put that in, the good ones have their birthdays in, you know, a little bit of interesting knowledge. I write virtually everything in my notes. So when I start talking to clients again, I can talk to them like a friend. And I think that that's important because you're going to be talking to potential buyers, people who are purchasing your art. You're going to be talking to potential people who you're selling you product, your paint and any other thing, who you're renting from, or whatever you're doing. All of that in my mind needs to be tracked. And the biggest difference between, in my mind, regardless of the industry, between a successful business and a non-successful business is how they treat their customers. And if you treat, you have to have a good product, of course, but if you treat your customers with dignity and respect, you should be pretty good.
Yeah, no, that was great. I mean, it goes back to, again, like you said in the beginning, relationships. Relationships are the key to building a strong business. I have one more question for you. What are some common mistakes creatives make in regards to their finances?
The biggest ones for me are one, ignoring it, not dealing with it. Okay. And that has, I have a brother who's a blues guitarist, and his MO was just prop me up on stage. And well, it didn't quite work out that way. So you can't ignore your finances, especially things like credit. If a lot of young folks have poor credit because we do a bad job of teaching our high schoolers how to deal with finances. So oftentimes by the time they're 21 or 22, they've been bombarded with credit card commercials and they're struggling with credit. If it is a challenge, we need to fix that because it never goes away. So don't ignore it. If it's a problem, deal with it. The other one is waiting to start. Like I said, start right away. Even if you don't have money in, start to look at how things go. You mentioned about a book, like personal finance for dummies is probably as good as any of them and they're great. I've not used that one, but I've used them in other areas and they really are good. If you go through that, you'll absolutely have a great handle on things. So you want to start early, believing it's too complicated. You mentioned that you don't like math. All business finance is really just adding and subtracting. It just is. It's once you get your mind wrapped around it, it's not rocket science. It's just not. And the final one is not sticking to the plan. You know, starting something and then not doing it, starting something and not doing it. So those are and they're not just for creatives, but they for everybody. But I do find in my mind that creative people don't focus on the finance side of things. They don't think about that. Some don't even want to, like it taints them somehow that they're not, that they're, selling out, so to speak. I don't view it that way. If somebody's willing to pay me for my art, my God, I would be dancing in the street. So yeah, stick with the plan once you get it going. Does that make sense to those 4 points?
No, totally. And thank you so much for all of your wisdom and advice. This is really great. Abby, I think you wanted to.
I'll jump in. Yeah. So already reached the hour. That flew by. I know I have a lot of questions. I'm sure our guests have a lot of questions. So please go ahead and start entering the Q&A if you have questions. But I wanted to start with a question for both of y'all. We talked a lot about like how to manage money once we have it, right? But thinking about young artists who are just starting off and maybe aren't making the money they wish they could be at, sorry for the background noise, that they could be, what are some ways that they could grow their business to start making more money from their art, whether it's through sales or side gigs? What are some fundamentals they need to actually increase that income?
I would always say promoting your work. If nobody knows you're an artist, if nobody knows that you bake cakes, if nobody knows that you make music, how can you expect them to support you? So I think it's really about, telling people about it, spreading the word, using social media. Sometimes it's like putting on your own events. If you're an artist who's fortunate enough to have a studio space, you can organize your own open studios. You can just invite people over to your studio, small groups. You can post that on social media. You can go, live with your open studio event, just talking about your work. And I think when I think about, businesses, really like big businesses, they spend a majority of their profits on advertising. Nike, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, they are putting so much money into, commercials, billboards, anywhere they can stick their logo, their product, is what they're doing. And that's just to try to, generate more attention. And I feel like we as artists, sometimes we're creative, we're more introverts, we like to, keep our creativity to ourselves. But if you are interested in making a living from your work, I think you kind of have to give some attention to actually promoting what you do and spreading the word.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. I'm a firm believer in personal networking. And we're talking about, Devin, you were talking about people who are just beginning and aren't making much money. Well, chances are they're not even known in their local art community. They have to get credibility in the community first. Most of us, as you said, Alteronce, we kind of hide what we do. We're in our basements, we're in our studios, if we're writing, we're somewhere else. We could be great, but even the art community in the Lehigh Valley doesn't know who we are. So I absolutely advise like volunteering into different things, volunteering at the museum, volunteering at other art venues, like whether it's the Civic Theater on the west side of Allentown and you're just handing out playbills, whatever it is, get your face in front of people in art and get them to start to know you. Now, it takes time. This is it's not something that you're going to get rich overnight, but it's absolutely worth the effort. Because you get a chance to then prove your worth. If I'm handing out playbills at the Civic Theater and I do a great job and I show up on time and and the people love me, but I happen to be an artist at the same time, why wouldn't, if I'm putting that much effort into volunteering, just imagine what I'm putting into my own stuff. And right. That's kind of what you want to do, is build, in my mind, that community internally, because you want folks to know, and there's thousands of artists in the Valley. Well, that's thousands of potential customers that chances are would prefer to buy from another artist. If they could, I absolutely would support other artists if it made sense. So the personal network, especially in the beginning, and to get out there, I also think it helps them to overcome the hurdle of being in front of people and starting to talk and admitting you're an artist. What happened to me recently was, as I was leaving community action, even my closest friends didn't really know that I played. I mean, this is I've been doing forever, but it kind of quit. I just started announcing to people, literally in class, hey, I'm DJ and I'm a musician. Well, you'd be surprised in like 3 or 4 years how many people just know me as that now. And that's the point. I haven't changed. I just acknowledged it. And you need to get out and believe it in yourself and acknowledge it, but then get over the hurdle and be able to talk to people.
Yeah. If you believe you're an artist, then you'll convince other people to believe in you as well. You have to believe in yourself first. Once you believe, then that will spread and other people will believe and start supporting you as well.
Right. But belief in your own art can be a very fragile thing.
Yeah, it can. I think kind of related to that question I hear a lot from artists, I know I always deal with, is how to price work and understanding who that target audience is. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is it's interesting because I guess it all depends on where you are. You really have to understand your market, where you're selling at, who you're selling to, and where you're starting out. That first piece that I talked about at the beginning of the talk, that was in, the holiday show at, what was that? Our Students League. I just put a number down. I asked my friend, what should I put down? Is the first piece. I've never sold a piece. What should I put down? And it was $40. And it wasn't my best work. I just took one class at the Art Students League. It was a nice little, doodle out of acrylic. But it started somewhere. It gave me a base point. I think that if you have some, and it also depends on the size. I think if you're starting out, if you're an undergrad, maybe it also again depends on where you are, what neighborhood, what city. But maybe start out like $50, $100, depending on the size, and see how that goes. If you're in a coffee shop, and you're maybe showing some work in a coffee shop, ask the barista, ask the cafe owner, what is usually the price point of artworks that are shown here. If you're having your first show at a gallery, and it's a group show, ask the gallerist, what is usually a good starting price point for me, showing at this level, and they'll tell you. But it's usually good to ask people who maybe have already had an experience of selling work, that are in your social circle, that are at your level. Ask them where they started at, and then work from there. But everybody's going to be different. It changes from city to city, country to country. But I would just ask your peers first, what are their selling points, and then maybe base your selling points off of that.
Yeah, this one I have to admit is a struggle for me, because it's outside of what I normally think. Typically, when we're pricing, it's here's the product we're purchasing for, here's the time put into it. It's easy to put those component things together, but I can't really talk to an artist and say, all right, you use $1 worth of paint, and it took you 5 hours at $20 an hour, so that's $100, because that same two different people with the exact same paint, exact same thing, depending on their reputation, as you're saying, or where they are, one might be $100 and one might be $10,000. So a lot of it is really the reputation of the artist. And in my mind, sometimes it doesn't even have to be, because art, especially when it comes to painting, is subjective.
Right.
People looking the same, one could hate it, one could love it. And the person who didn't like it wouldn't pay a penny for it. So that's part of the issue there. But one of the benefits, so I don't have a good handle on the pricing, but one of the benefits of building a catalog of art, in your case, if you have stuff that's not selling and it's in a closet somewhere, or in my case, if I have songs that aren't selling, anywhere along the line, if one does hit, my entire catalog becomes more valuable.
Exactly.
So stuff that you did, like if you sell something huge, $500,000 5 years from now, everything else you sold, including that $40 one in the very beginning, is all going to rise in value, every bit of it. So that helps them. But unfortunately, Don, I don't have a great answer on specifically how to price, other than understand what the market will bear around you.
How do you determine what that market is? Do you have any advice for that? Especially DJ, for being in the Valley or Alteronce, from your experience, like how do you understand who's buying your work, who would want to buy your work? Any insight in that area?
Well, I go locally to a place called The Lodge on the south side of Bethlehem, and it's designed for people with mental health issues. I just love supporting it. And there's art all over the walls, and it's priced. And some of it is, I think, wonderful. I'd be happy to own. And some of it is not necessarily wonderful to me. It could all be great. But in that particular case, I wouldn't put something in there that was like 5 times more expensive than the stuff that was there. It's that, in my mind, that kind of thing. But there's local art galleries. There's where you can go, and some of it's priced. There on Main Street in Bethlehem is that other art gallery where you can purchase, I forget the name of it, but you can purchase stuff. I mean, check your competition. If you were starting a restaurant, you'd be going around to your competition to see how they're doing.
Yeah.
Do the same thing. Go to every museum, gallery, see what's available.
So,
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. It's really about context, you know. I'm in New York City. The price of living is a little bit higher than Bethlehem or Allentown. But yeah, it's kind of the same thing that DJ was saying. You know, if I was showing at a gallery, it was kind of the same thing. I would just really get the advice from the gallerists, what they think the price point for the work is, because they have much more, they're experts in selling art. So they would be better knowledgeable for telling you, what they feel like they could, this could sell for this. And that's really what you want. But then once you have that first sale, that is the benchmark. That's the starting point for everything else. And usually in art, whatever you start at, the prices do not go down. It's not like the other industries where you got some back inventory. You're like, oh, I'm going to sell these, half off this week. It doesn't work like that in the art world. So it's like the prices, generally, you always want to go up from there. So I wouldn't advise starting out if you've never sold a piece of art at all. You have no exhibition history. I wouldn't start out pricing my work at $10,000 because you have nothing to support that. You have no market to support that price. So you kind of want to start low. You kind of want to start, sensible. You actually want to allow yourself to gain traction with collectors. You want to start building relationship with collectors, with galleries, with customers. And so you want to have a good entry point for those potential clients, which is why I say, if you've never sold a piece of art, depending on where you are, maybe $100, maybe it's a couple $100, but I wouldn't go too crazy in the beginning.
yeah, that's good advice.
And I love the concept of building relationships with those gallery owners, like you're saying, because 2 people with equal quality of talent, if one person's hard to deal with as a human being and the other one's not, they're going to go with the guy who's easy to deal with. I mean, that's just how, and that's, again, thinking like a business person, has nothing to do with mental equality. It's, I'm going to be easy to work with. I'm going to make it real easy for that gallery to hang my stuff, as opposed to being something arrogant or something like that.
Yeah.
So another question that came through the chat is, again, kind of on this topic of pricing your work and thinking about it as a business. Obviously, you want to at least try to pay yourself a living wage. Does it make sense to artists at least kind of start by considering an hourly wage that they'd want to get paid, and just start from there as a benchmark?
I don't think it hurts to have that. I was putting together something for like writers, a group of people who are trying to make there's a whole pile of people out there who are incredible writers. And they're typically English teachers and things like that, because it's hard to make money selling books. And a lot of people who even have books to sell. So I was talking to them about how to, and I've lost my train of thought. I'm sorry, Devin.
No, that's okay. No, yeah, just talking about
the question again, just real quick. I'm sorry.
Just talking about the hourly rate and like kind of deciding to pay yourself an hourly wage.
So thank you. So when I talked to writers, I said, all right, this is something you could be doing in your part-time. How much would you have to make to get off the couch to write something? And most people say, I'm not getting off the couch for less than $50 per hour. But these are people who have real jobs. I would look at the folks and say, what can you make in the real world?
Yeah.
And make at least that. At
Yeah,
least
that's true.
never be lower, certainly not minimum wage, my gosh. And to be honest, we're creative. Why not double? Well, if we think we can make $15 an hour in the real world, let's make it 30, but it has to be realistic.
Yeah. So we had another question. We talked a little bit at the beginning about opening an LLC and kind of what goes into that and having the different business accounts. And you mentioned that that might be later down the line. What are some of the ways you can kind of determine when it's time to have an LLC, or how long does it make sense to just kind of stay as a sole proprietor?
Well, to be honest, you can stay as a sole proprietor forever. You just can, because especially once you've built name recognition. I would, if I have a name that everybody knows, like a current artist, like I wouldn't change my name, because you've already spent all this time building the brand. But yeah, I think that whenever.
What's a good benchmark? Like when you make a certain amount of money, or maybe like when you start taking on employees or certain kinds of
Employees, absolutely. Employees, absolutely. Because what happens then, you become liable as a sole proprietor when your employees do something goofy. Now you could be a sole proprietor and have 1,000 employees. It's not that, but that once you form that structure, the LLC, then it gives you the space that you can have some liability protection. But if it's just one person, I mean, I did form an LLC for myself, but in reality, chances are I would never really have needed to, because it's always just going to be me. And but as you feel like you're growing and you want to build, maybe break out of that brand is a good time to do it. Or again, if you are like a pottery person, and you have a very cool name for your idea, then do that first and just grab it. And you don't even have to form the bank account immediately, but you would reserve the business.
Right. And I know sometimes when you like go on the websites about registering for business, you'll see 3 options: sole proprietor, LLC, and then like incorporation. Does that at any point kind of factor in for creatives or artists to be a corporation?
Potentially somewhere down the road. The regular C Corp is the ability to sell stock. So if you got to the point where you thought you were going to go public and have people buy into your company, you would need to have that. There's a ton of other regulations that go with it, including double taxation. That's why LLCs are so prevalent. The other one is an S Corp, and it's slightly smaller. So I think you can only have 125 shareholders, and they have to be US born citizens, is the last time I remember. Those are things that you'd have to get gigantic in my mind to want to do. I've seen people order or open S Corps recently, and their business advisors are telling them to do it. And I haven't had anybody explain to me why that makes sense.
Good advice. So one more question that came in is really about balancing investing, paying off debt, saving, investing in the future. Like, how do you balance all those things? Is there a timeline, priorities?
My first priority is I think about retirement. So, and again, it can be pennies a day. It doesn't have just something to get it started. But after that, you want to pay debt off first, because if I'm paying a debt that's 15% interest rate, if I would have to invest that money in a vehicle that would give me 15% interest rate for that to make sense. So, so it's good to try to pay that down. If you're paying multiple credit cards down, for example, or multiple debts, pick the 2 different ways to go. Or one, pick the smallest one so you can have the victory of paying one totally off. But the realistic is pick the one with the highest interest rate and focus on that and try to get it down. So it's better to be debt-free if possible. There's good debt and bad debt. Like if you own a house, that's good debt. If you have a car loan, that's not bad debt. Bad debt is like credit cards, stuff that's really, there's the difference between when you talk about savings, there's a difference between a want and a need. And when we're younger, we have a tendency to want everything, but we don't need everything. And part of that is really being able to curb that a little bit as well.
So
yeah, I've really had to work on, I guess the what is it? The designate, the distribution of funds throughout my career. It's money comes in. I've always been a good saver. So I've always been good at saving money. But when I got to the point where I was kind of managing my, personal business account, personal bank account and my business bank account, and then my personal credit card and my business credit card, things get a little bit, more tricky. And then, as DJ was saying, maybe you have some investment accounts, maybe a few subcontractors that's working for you doing things on a regular basis. I have studio assistants. The finances kind of get a little, difficult. But something someone told me is that because in terms of like credit, I always try to make sure that my personal credit cards are in good standings. Because personal credit is actually what helps you, is what they run when you get to a certain level and you want to get business credit. So if you want to open a business credit or get business credit cards, which can help your business grow because you have more access to funds, they're going to run your personal credit first. And then once that business credit is open, then everything that happens when that business credit is all in your business. You can like let that go to shit. It's fine. I don't recommend it, but it won't affect your personal credit. So, I think Jay-Z said one time, what's better than, something is credit, and so credit is really key. I feel in terms of like really building your business or even helping to manage your finances. Eventually, if you want to get a house, you want to get a car, people are going to run your personal credit. So I try to make sure that my personal credit is key, and also to make sure that if I have any debt out there, this goes back to relationships. That I'm paying my employees, I'm paying my contractors. I have gotten into the habit of paying myself last.
Exactly.
At the end of the month, I pay myself last, and sometimes I'm left with pennies. I'm left with nothing, but it's fine because I know that the relationships around my business are in good standings. So if I need to call in a favor with somebody, if I need someone to, hey, I'm working on this project, I need a favor. Can maybe I don't have the funds to really pay, a deposit right now, but because of my relationship, they know I'm good for it. I paid them on time in previous projects. Then I can leverage that. This is maybe just a little bit more of a broader mentality that I have when I'm addressing my finances. But I kind of go through at the end of every month. I pay my rent. I try to pay off the major debt. Make sure I have a roof over my head. I don't want my landlord running after me. I try to make sure my credit cards are paid down, and I try to make sure that my contractors, my studio assistants, all have what they are owed.
Great, thank you for that. So we're approaching the end of our time. Just wanted to circle back to something we talked about in the beginning about financial planners, having those network of experts. I think oftentimes when young people are just starting out with this, it seems like, oh, that's just not for me. Like, I don't even know how to get a financial planner. Like, what does that cost? How do I do that? Like, what's the advice for that? How do you get a financial planner and start getting that professional advice, or even a consultant?
Well, from a financial planner perspective, and again, I talk about relationships all the time. I think you interview them. On a personal note, we went through 2 or 3 financial planners before we finally settled on the person that we have now. And the reason being is my wife and I are a total team. We do all our decisions together. Most financial planners all years ago were men, and they ignored my wife when we were sitting and talking to us. I already knew the finances. They needed to be talking to her. So we eventually got to a group that was all women, and they paid attention to my wife, and we've been with that person ever since. I truly believe that if you're a good financial planner, the good ones are all the same. There's the same knowledge, the same changes in banking rules, that's all the same. It's really the person that reaches you personally. And with us, the story was, we're in our early 30s. We just moved to the Lehigh Valley. We thought we had the world by the butt. And when we went to talk about retirement, the lady that we're currently work with scared the hell out of us. It's like, you don't have a chance if you don't start doing something. And we both believed it. And it made, and I mean that, it made all the difference in our lives, because even though I'd like to think I know finances, in my own world, I was a few years ago now, but still all botched up. It took somebody actually kind of slapping us around a little bit and saying, you got to do something. So, but again, that's what we needed mentality wise. You might need somebody totally different from a relationship perspective, and somebody else might be that. Typically, financial planners get paid as they're making their money for you. It's not an upfront fee. If they're not willing to interview you, then I wouldn't go with them at all. I don't like banks to do this, because I was a banker and we had limits of the dollar amount that we could do. And if it were too low, we weren't allowed to talk to folks. Well, those are the people who need it the most. The absolute people. The people who need it the most are the folks who don't have any money right now. So as it's coming in, they can jumpstart it right away. So it's long-winded, but please talk to a bunch of different people. Find somebody that you trust to be able to tell anything to.
Yeah, and you mentioned business consultants. Obviously, you're a business consultant at Lehigh Small Business Development Center. Where else can folks go to get advice on this, even if they're just starting out and just have questions after this talk?
We have a great network here in the Lehigh Valley. There are certainly paid consultants that do the marketing, things like that. And if it gets to that point, you certainly want to pay attention there. At Lehigh, we offer free confidential business consulting at no charge. We specialize in certain areas. I tend to focus on startups, what we're talking about now, people who are just starting out. We have some folks who talk about even more finance, growing the business. It's a wonderful organization, but there's also an organization called SCORE Lehigh Valley that does long-term mentoring for people who are starting businesses, and they're free. And there's Penn State in the Lehigh Valley campus has Launchbox. They do entrepreneur support for free. I feel like I'm talking about my competition, but that's not the case, because we're here to support the entrepreneur community. And we have this great network that not everybody even knows about. And when I'm working with somebody, I absolutely recommend that at some point they contact the other organizations at bare minimum, just to network. Because when you're talking to me from a business perspective, you're talking to my entire network, everybody that I know. When you're talking to a SCORE representative, you're talking to their network. Well, that's a whole nother set of people who now know that you're an artist, now know what the quality of individual you have. So it really is an amazing community. Now, people can reach directly to me and I can answer some questions, but there are some resources out there, the three that I just mentioned, that are kind of incredible.
Excellent, excellent. It's good to know that they're all local. So as we approach 7:30, do either of you have any kind of closing insights, things you want to share with our attendees before we wrap up?
No, I like to actually just congratulate everyone who took the time to seek out this information. I think it's really important. I'm someone who believes that knowledge is power, and the more knowledge you have about certain things that are going on in the world that may make you feel uncomfortable, that you're actually seeking out that information, that at the end of this, I hope you feel a little bit more empowered to talk about those subjects and seek out more information. And I encourage you to keep learning.
And I would just like to say thank you so much for the opportunity and to talk about this, because I think it's critical, and to never give up, keep creating forever, because you just never know. And if you're doing a generic job and creating, get to the point, as Alteronce, as you said earlier, you get to a tipping point where you're making more money in art and you jettison the other job and keep going. Hopefully that might happen at age 65 to me. So if you never give up and never surrender, so to speak, but continue to create, but think like a business person.
Mm-hmm. Great advice. All right, so thank you both so much. I just want to second what you said. I just hope we keep having these conversations. I know it can be overwhelming and a little intimidating, for those of us just starting out. But obviously we have resources here, and thank you both so much for just taking the time to share your wisdom. So I'll take care.
No, thank you. Thank you, DJ.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody. Have a great evening.
It was a blast. Stay in touch. If I can answer any questions or anybody, please let me know.
You heard him. Take care, y'all.
Bye.